Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you to Ian. Thank you for battling through the changing of the guard. I think that's what was going on outside. It's another little thing that we lay on for you for some entertainment today. Well, if you thought that computer games were big, wait for what comes next, because the UK hasn't just produced some of the greatest household names in music, from the Beatles to Bowie, the Rolling Stones to Radiohead. It's also home to a £4 billion industry of music promoters, record labels, technicians, festivals, you name it. So to discuss the future of the music industry here, we're delighted to be joined now by journalist Miranda Sawyer, who's going to host this session. Miranda.
Hello everyone, I am a journalist who mostly writes about music, and I'm going to stand here because it sounds a bit funny. The reason why I wanted to host this panel is I am convinced that let's forget all this, be nice to each other, we're all in the creative industries together, music is the best. I'd like to say that music, particularly British music, is what makes a lot of people get up in the world. If you can gather music to your life, as many people do, just switch on the radio, get it on your computer, it will enhance your life in a way that a lot of other creative industries just can't manage. It belongs to you in the way that watching a film, going to the theatre, just doesn't manage. And that's why I've always liked to write about music, and why I'm very happy to be hosting this event. There's chairs there, and there's people over there that are going to fill them. One of the other things I wanted to say is, when we watched the Olympic opening ceremony, there was a section in which music was played, and there was like a medley section, just a few bars that came out of various tracks. And as soon as that happened, you knew that song. And all those songs were British. And I have to say that when we had Dizzy Rascal and then the Arctic Monkeys, finally Paul McCartney, performing on that stage, I felt a massive sense of pride in what Britain has brought to the world, this universal, fantastic sound that everybody in the world can join in on. So that's why I wanted to host this panel. The other thing that's happened to the music industry, obviously, over the last 10 years, slightly longer, is it's been devastated by digital in a way that perhaps hasn't hit other industries yet. And yet the music industry has managed to get through that time and come out a stronger business, still making money, still profitable. So it has a lot of lessons that it's learned that it can share with other industries here. And to join me up here in sharing their lessons that they've learned, we have 3 people. I'm going to bring you out in order of where you're sitting, I think. So Nick Gatfield first. Nick Gatfield is chairman and CEO of Sony Music. He started out as an artist, playing sax and keyboards for Dexy's Midnight Runners, no less, before moving to the business end of the music business, working in A&R across all the major labels. He was responsible for signing Blur, Radiohead and Amy Winehouse, and recently he's been overseeing Sony's most recent success, those 5 slim-hipped little tabloid teasers, One Direction. Next up, we're going to have Martin Mills. Come on, Martin. He's chairman of the Beggars group, which is a kind of umbrella group of iconic indie labels, XL, 4AD, Matador and Rough Trade, and is home to artists like Jarvis Cocker, The XX, White Stripes, Radiohead and Adele. And he started out with his own label, Beggars Banquet, in 1977, and has been described, I hope you don't mind, Martin, as one of the last great punk-era survivors. And finally, we've got Ken Parks, who is Chief Content Officer and Managing Director of Spotify USA. He's been a high-end executive for EMI, Chief Technology Counsel at Reuters, and in March of this year, he said that Spotify sees an opportunity in the vast bulk of music consumption that goes completely unmonetized. We all see that opportunity, but Spotify is one of the few companies that's actually worked out a way of actually monetizing them. So, welcome panel. Give them a round of applause. So I'd like to start off with a kind of general question, which is about the fact that the music industry has kind of suffered over the last 10 years. It was devastated really by the fact that people wanted to access music for free, and how it's come out of that. What are the kind of lessons that we've learned from that? Should I start with you, Nick?
Sure. You know, I think we hit a turning point, certainly in the UK and certainly for my company this year, where now north of 50% of our revenues are derived from digital exploitation. And I think that's a very positive sign for the future. And I think it's to a certain extent, and we got an awful lot of criticism, I think we did have our head in the sand to a degree about what consumers wanted. And to be absolutely honest as well, I think it took quite a long time also to build a framework to protect intellectual property as well, which was still ongoing, and there's still an endless debate. But I think there is a bright future for the business now. Now we sort of come to grips with really where consumers are. You know, we talk about, you know, as I said, 50% of our revenues are derived from digital exploitation. And if you look at overall consumption of music, it's close to 80% through the digital medium. So that's clearly where the audience is. You know, there is a fantastic aspect, obviously, about digital exploitation, which is, you know, it's immediate global access for people to be able to experience our content. It's the ability to distribute music far and wide, to find audiences all over the globe. That's a huge plus. The key, you know, question for us is obviously how do we be able to monetize that to allow us to invest in further artist development, and also encouraging government to build a framework of legislation to protect rights holders. And equally well, you know, something which we're a big believer in, certainly from Sony point of view, is creating commercial innovation. So working with myriad digital platforms, certainly the telecoms companies I think are going to be a huge partner for us with the advent of 4G, is really looking at strong commercial solutions. And I think that's the future, and I think it's positive for us.
Okay. Do you want to talk about it, Martin?
Yeah, I think we're at the point now where if we didn't have digital, we wouldn't have a business. I mean, physical retail is still important to us, but without digital, we'd be dying. And I think the lesson we learned over the last 10 or 12 years is that you have to strike a balance between giving the consumer what they want on the one hand and actually be able to run a business and monetize your copyrights on the other hand. You have to strike a balance. As Nick says, I think we've done better or worse or better over the years at striking that balance, but I think we're pretty much in the right place now.
There was a moment of panic, though, wasn't there, in the music industry, really, kind of early on, perhaps in this century, where it just seemed like everybody wanted stuff for free, and there was no way of monetizing it because the money that you could get was so small. It was things from ringtones and things like that.
Well, it's difficult competing with free. I mean, it's difficult for us as rights owners. It's more difficult for digital businesses who are competing with free. But you have to come up with a product that's a lot more attractive than free. And if you work in a copyright business, free is always going to be there because.
And do you want to explain the phenomenal success of Spotify, who've seen an opportunity, really, in that free?
Yeah, well, to pick up on a theme that Nick started with, I think the overarching lesson of the last decade is that you've got to watch what your consumers are doing and adapt to it. The introduction of Napster was a watershed event, and users got a taste of all the music in the world at the speed of light. And once they got that taste, it was so delicious that they didn't want to stop. So the genie's out of the bottle and there's no putting it back. I think you need to find a model that adapts to that behavior. The most successful business models are ones that don't force users to change what they're doing, but look at what they're doing and then satisfies that need. So what Spotify has been pretty successful at doing is adapting the model of distributing music to what users actually want. So we have a couple of different kinds of services, one of which is free. As Martin pointed out, it's difficult to compete with free unless you have free. So Spotify was born as a service that was going to be better than piracy. And our philosophy has always been that once users experience something that's even better, they're going to get hooked and they're going to start paying. And we've thankfully been successful at converting many people, many millions of people who used to steal music into paying customers.
There is an argument that if you stream music, which is essentially what Spotify is about, that you don't then buy music. Has that been borne out from all of you?
I don't think so. I think it's a real mix. I think also people stream music to discover it. I think that the habit of acquiring something intangible and invisible, it sticks with people, that people actually do like buying downloads and they also like streaming. It's a mixed economy we have now.
Yeah, Spotify users are actually more likely to buy music than the general population. That's true even of subscribers who, in theory, have all of the functionality afforded by the purchase of music. They nevertheless sort of, for whatever reason, emotion or whatever, for the things they really love and fall in love with as a result of discovering them on Spotify, they still purchase. So we think that over time, that the music industry is not sort of a single model like the unit sale model was. It's a multiple of models that fit different needs and consumer behaviors.
Which takes a lot of work to work out what these models are. to be honest. I mean, imagine you spend all your time working out how to make money these days. Does it not turn it into a rather boring job? All you do is think about business and none of the creators then?
No, not at all. I mean, I thought, the fundamental job for me has never changed. It's, the artist is the centre of our universe, and it's always about great talent. The means of actually getting that great talent to an audience is, I don't care what the delivery method happens to be, as long as the art is protected, we're paid for, and the artist is paid for the effort that they put into creating their art. And I think that's where the opportunity is. I mean, the interesting thing, I mean, you look at services like Spotify, which is having an enormous impact on the Swedish market. It's early days, I think, for the company here, but it's interesting. I mean, I think we're going to provide a holistic service to the music consumers. They want to stream, they want to have fixed downloads. There will still be a physical market as well. I don't think we can write that off entirely, because there is an audience out there who values physical product. I think, again, it's up to us to provide a suite of products which are going to suit a different suite of consumers.
What about the idea of social media? I know that social media has obviously become important for Spotify, and actually, in terms of Adele, one of your massive successes, and One Direction, that was also important as well. How did you use social media to launch those lovely scamps, One Direction?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we have I suppose my strapline at the moment is that we sign locally and we market globally, and that's largely because of, again, what digital can provide for you and the reach and the power of it. And the interesting thing with, what One Direction proved to us was that actually 14-year-old girls are identical worldwide. So with exactly the same tastes, habits, they read the same things, they watch the same TV shows by and large. And every artist at whatever stage of their career, certainly when they sign to a major label, have some kind of social community. It may be very small, and then our job really is how do you accelerate that and build on that. And what we found with One Direction, it was happening totally automatically and growing at an extraordinary rate in markets which frankly didn't have any access really to the X Factor other than online. So you'd see markets like Sweden and Italy and Australia and America where these pockets of interest were growing, and again the power of 14-year-old girls, you get an evangelist and they evangelize all their friends. And it was an interesting lesson for us because, again, we built up such a head of steam globally with that act before we even went to radio. The proof of that was, the first week in the States that their first single was released, we sold over 130,000 downloads before radio played the record. And that really is again, one of the areas I think we will touch on, but it's, how the business has changed is, radio and traditional media aren't marketing plans now, they're the result of marketing plans. Marketing is about us using all the tools that digital provide, which are phenomenal, to go out and find an audience. And they'll speak back to you incredibly quickly. You know if you're on the wrong track, you know if you're not resonating out there. But if you find some point of resonance, or you find a point of entry and you find where that resonance is and you can grow it, you build a head of steam where traditional media start pulling from you as opposed to you pushing.
It's very interesting because the idea traditionally was that radio and perhaps television, although there's less music on television these days, was how you launched an act, wasn't it? If you didn't have the act on Radio 1, you couldn't get anywhere.
Yeah, it was the. We're very fortunate in this country. Some say cursed. I actually say fortunate that we do have national media like Radio 1, because I think, again, it helps sort of propagate that fact of popular music being part of our national identity. I mean, it's, when national radio and TV decide to back an artist, it truly is a national phenomenon. Things can happen incredibly quickly, and I think that's a good thing for this business. But equally well, if you're not on the playlist, then, well, how do you get traction? And my view is you market an artist to the point where there is a natural head of steam, which forces the hand of radio to, be the accelerator. They have to do it.
And what about you, Martin? Because your acts are traditionally, I mean, Adele, let's talk about Adele, because she's obviously a phenomenon, but your acts are she's almost like an exception to your rule, isn't she? What happened with Adele then?
It was a miracle. She connected with people worldwide in a way that was unprecedented and very personal. And one of the really interesting things about how she's connected is that when people saw her perform Someone Like You on the Brits, and they rushed out in their droves to buy the record or buy the digital download, they didn't go to buy the track. Much that they loved the track, they went to buy the album. And one of the struggles that the record industry has had over the last 10 years, probably its greatest struggle, has actually been the disaggregation of the album. and the opportunity for people to buy tracks rather than whole albums. And the kind of music we do, and actually most of our music is much more alternative than Adele's, but it applies to Adele as well. People buy the album, not the track, whereas with One Direction, I suspect it's the other way around. I think, picking up on something that Nick said, I think that marketing has become a very, very subtle process in the music industry now, and it's all about creating pull rather than pushing. You can't really call the editor of a magazine and say, my act is great, put them on the cover anymore. You used to be able to do that 10 years ago. Now you have to create an environment in which people are saying, other people are saying to them, you've got to put that act on the cover. Yeah. And it's a very, very subtle process, and getting it 5% on or off target can make all the difference.
Do you think that, I mean, there was an argument just a few years ago that the album was actually was dead as a form because there's no reason for, you know, there are artists that just put tracks out or just put mixtapes out. They just don't bother with an album. I mean, do you think that it will continue, or is it just a hangover from the 60s?
I think the album is alive and well, perhaps surprisingly. But I think that real fans of an artist, especially when you're looking at more fan-based artists, they like to buy the whole album. Not quite often they like to buy the vinyl artifact, and maybe they'll get a download or stream it as well. But they like to possess it, they like the whole thing, and they feel that that's a commitment to an artist.
But do you think that will kind of die out as these people get older, and then?
I see no sign of it.
Oh, well, that's good. All right.
Let me just add, one of the great things about Spotify, and if you talk to artists, they'll say the same thing, is people are starting to listen to albums again because it's frictionless. There isn't any pain involved in listening to that second track or some obscure track on a record, okay? You do that without incremental cost. If you have to purchase each one of those, you're much less likely to want to consume that whole experience in one bite. So what we're finding is people are discovering that the album format is a wonderful thing, and that a story is being told in that selection and arrangement of tracks, and people are tasting full albums again, which has to be good news for artists who view that as their format of choice.
Yeah, they're awful.
I think that's right. I think if you consume single tracks, I think we all did it when we first accessed digital music. We played all of our favourite tracks all the time. But it's like eating ice cream all the time. You get sick of it in the end. And the beauty of an album is there are tracks that take longer to engage you, and there's tracks with different moods and so on, and the ones you like at the beginning and not the ones you like at the end. It's a kind of 40, 50, 60-minute experience in itself, which is really thriving on Spotify.
It absolutely is.
What about, because Spotify obviously is now got, how many tracks have you got on Spotify?
16 million or so.
Okay, so that is a lot of tracks to choose from. And that can seem bewildering to people when they initially kind of access that service. And you've gradually brought in different things, such as an alliance with Facebook, to try and help people with that, haven't you? How has that worked?
Well, Facebook partnership is really cool because it exposes all of a user's listening activity to all of his or her friends, and that helps with the first order of business with the new act especially, which is to get people to care about your music. So he exposes it to this community that's going on a billion strong. But Spotify is a company that knows what it does really well, and it knows what it doesn't really have the capability to do well. So we provide all of those 16 million tracks, make them accessible in less than a quarter of a second anywhere you are, which is a great thing. But we're not editorialists, we don't have those kinds of capabilities, but there are a lot of third parties out there who do those things really well. So what we've done is make Spotify a platform, and we've invited all of those folks who do things like editorial really well to come on, and we provide the soundtrack to that. So, for instance, when you're reading the Rolling Stone review, you can be listening to the track at the same time. That's sort of our philosophy. Let's stick to what we know how to do, which is enabling this wonderful delivery experience and discovery experience, but let third parties come in as well and provide all the value that they have on top of that experience. And the whole thing, I think, provides a much richer and engaging experience, which ultimately, hopefully, will get people, more interested in spending more of their leisure time listening to music. At the end of the day, that's what we all want. In this day and age, everyone has a lot of different forms of entertainment now that they didn't have 20, 30 years ago, gaming especially. And if the average person only has 4 hours a day of leisure time to spend on TV and all these other things, what we would like to do is increase the amount of time allotted to music, and we can do that by providing a deeper, more engaging experience, including editorial, things like that.
Spotify, within the music industry, has had some tough times. It's not necessarily always been welcomed by artists because they feel that they're not getting paid enough from Spotify's streaming. How would you answer that? And also, I'd like to know how you feel about artists earning money off Spotify, because there have been complaints, haven't there?
Well, I think there have been a few myths around Spotify, and if I could debunk one, it's the one that you just mentioned, which is we don't pay back to artists a fair share. To date, we've paid back over $250 million to rights holders, $180 million in the last year alone. We're probably pacing about twice that in the next 12 months, given our growth. I can tell the audience today that we have just surpassed the 4 million paid user mark, which is a milestone for us. A great number of whom were stealing music before or not buying a thing. So at the end of the day, what a stream is worth is kind of irrelevant from our standpoint. We do pay a healthy amount per listening event compared to competing channels, but it's how many people are buying music and how much are they buying, and it's the multiplication of those two things that is the size of the record business. And thankfully, we're growing the market in everywhere we've launched. And to date, as I said, we've paid a lot of money back to the industry, but on a sort of quarterly basis, there's some artists that we're paying $500,000 a quarter to the rights holders who own the rights. So the money is real, and as we scale the business, it's only going to get better. In places like Sweden, the Nordics, where we launched, we're already the bulk of the revenue for certain artists, and we'd love that to be the case everywhere.
How do you feel about Spotify, given that some artists really don't want to use it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's been quite it's a hot debate with a number of artists, and I think largely it's down to ignorance. And I have to say ignorance, and also from some of the rights holders, some of the major record companies as well. It was quite interesting. I mean, I think we sort of all familiar with the headlines about, whether it's Lady Gaga's being streamed X billion of times, you've got to check for £3.60 or so. Yeah, the reality is, when you look at the model, and I think this is very interesting, and I think it bodes well for us as well, is the time horizon, or the lifespan of a piece of music. It tends to be much longer on Spotify. You can monetize it over a longer period of time. And ultimately, I think that will benefit us. And I think it will benefit the discovery process of deep catalogue. We'll start realising revenues from, frankly, music which we haven't monetised at all. Yeah. Very recently, actually, I just had a whole sort of presentation on Spotify and the payment model, and it's kind of literally so I can sit down with my artist and go, okay, this is how it works. I still think there needs to be sort of absolute tangible. Someone needs to get the fat check in their hand and go, oh, okay, great, thanks very much. But by and large, I think it's just a lack of understanding, and I think it's understanding that there is a different time horizon in terms of the way that you can monetize your content.
A long tail.
It's a long tail.
Yeah.
I'm finding that some of our artists, particularly the more catalogue ones, when I look at their royalty statements, some of them are earning more on streaming than on any other form of usage.
Is it true? I mean, it's true that it pays more than actually radio play as well now.
Oh, it pays many, many more times more than radio play. We're big supporters.
Okay. I'd like to ask a kind of slightly general question, which it might seem a bit daft, but what I wanted to know is, given that this is a kind of conference about the creative industries in general, and that music had a tough time, is there anything that you could give as a piece of advice to people who worked in other industries of what digital has what's happened with digital, with music, that you could then say this is really how you should go about things? I mean, obviously with some of the games we passed through as the games are talking about the idea of freemium and things like that. Do you think that there is anything to be learned other than just get on with it?
I think there's a big upside and downside to the digital revolution. Number one upside is it's another avenue to sell music. Number two upside is discovery. It certainly facilitates discovery, and it removes the traditional gatekeepers, and it allows great music to find its audience more quickly.
So if that could be true of film or anything else, yeah.
I agree with Martin. I think that is the upside. I mean, the interesting thing is, you you can't hide behind poor content anymore. You know, you can't sell music which is of inferior quality and hide behind a sort of a massive marketing wall behind it. You know, people find out, they'll discover it, and you know, and they vote very quickly with their, you know, with their micro payments, unfortunately. But that's the way it works. But the interesting thing, I think, the only thing that the other industries could probably take from the music experience is, you know, we have been the canary in the coal mine to a degree. I think we've got a lot of unfair criticism about the way we have reacted. You know, we have a legacy business, we have contracts, and we have structure in place, and it's very hard to suddenly flip it on its head and go, oh no, we're doing this now. Equally well, I think there's something, this is a debate, how we debated here, is, you know, the digital medium changes so rapidly. You know, we've been focusing on, particularly in the music business, we've been focusing on peer-to-peer. It's now the mobile space will be absolutely dominant, you know, with the advent of 4G and what that means in the mobile space for accessing, you know, content, whether it be music, TV shows or film, is revolutionary. So, you know, again, I think it's incumbent on government to make sure there's a framework of legislation to protect rights holders, but equally well, I think it's incumbent on us to ensure there's great commercial services and working with technology companies to provide those commercial services.
I'd say that if you're in the business of exploiting copyrights, it's a challenging time, but our experience has shown that it is very possible to build a sustainable, healthy business if you provide an experience that's compelling enough for people to want to invest in it. If you provide a so-called free experience that people will spend thousands of hours of their lives investing in, it becomes something that's very easy to upsell to a premium service for which they'll pay. In our case, it's the convenience of mobility. Users will absolutely pay for convenience. They spend a lot of money on coffee and things that, in my mind, have a lot less value than music. So the way we look at the world, you know, the opportunity is enormous. This business is going to be multiples of its current size very shortly. There are at least 500 million people who listen to music online without paying a thing. That's in one way a sad thing because it's resulted in industry revenues going way down, but it's an enormous opportunity if you look at it the other way. There's more money being gambled in Macau in 1 year than the size of the music industry today. And we think that's a scandal for something that touches 7 billion people and enriches every aspect of life. So we think that there are very happy times ahead, and it's because the industry, together with us, has partnered to find a model that users want and are ultimately willing to pay for.
Okay, I've got to wind it up. Yeah, he's going like this at me. But I just want to know one question. Why do you think that, it's really quick, what has British music got that other places has not got? Because I've got an answer if you want it.
You know, I think it's style, it's quirkiness, it's individuality, and it's, you know, there's something that I think it was someone said in the, I can't remember what president, it was the Bond, which is a Cubby Broccoli statement, which is, you know, the great thing is when you look at research, and research will come back and tell you don't do this, 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 and this. You know, I think great artists have come by completely ignoring what research says and doing something completely the opposite.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's to do with the media outlets for edgy alternative new things, the weekly music press, the BBC, Radio 1, Radio 6 and so on. I think those kind of outlets stimulate an environment in which people create something new and exciting and different. And radically different new music does tend to start here rather than in other countries.
What about somebody who's not British? What do you think?
As someone from a former colony and an admitted Anglophile, I could say that the creative output per capita of Britain is staggering. And as someone who grew up listening to 80s music, my life wouldn't be the same without all those amazing 80s artists, including Dexy's Midnight Runners.
Yeah. I think it's the rain. We haven't got anything else to do. My answer is it rains a lot, so there's not much to do, and also that we're very good at welcoming immigrants. So if you think about the Beatles, they have Irish parents, and so did Morrissey, and so did Oasis. And if you think about like Tiny Temper and Dizzy Rascal, also came to Britain and welcomed him. So from a musical point of view, I'm pro-immigration. But I say thank you very much, audience, and thank you to our fantastic panel.